as there was this horrifying incident in Liverpool, I think unfortunately it showed that we are now officially a low trust society, a society where we no longer have a core belief in our authorities to do right by us, and a society where policing by consent has been smashed. Certainly, when I was looking at the experiences of what we all went through last night and all the fears about what might have been, I saw millions simply refusing to believe what we were being told about the brutal incident at the Liverpool parade. And can you blame us? Can you blame us after the way that we have been so constantly and consistently lied to? A couple of public figures even raised their head above the parapet on this one. And Middleton, rumoured to be the Reform UK candidate for the London mayoralty. Do not believe anything that comes from police statements or the MSM. Corruption runs deep, and lessons were well and truly learnt from the not too distant past. God bless all the Scousers, and to all involved in this terrible terror type incident, may strength be with you. Donna Rachel, former Reform UK candidate, posted, police keep warning people not to speculate or spread misinformation, but they've done everything they possibly could to encourage speculation by spreading misinformation during previous incidents. We now literally don't know whether anything they've announced is true or not. So of course people are going to speculate. If we could trust that the police were telling us what was true, we wouldn't need to speculate. Now, shockingly, the police took no questions, even from the MSM, at their late night press conference, which to me suggests we are becoming a police state. I mean, it would be totally unheard of in a Western democracy which believes in a free press like the US. But of course, there was one key difference last night: the early release of information that the suspect was white. From the Daily Telegraph today, which reports the Liverpool Metro Mayor has said police were absolutely right to release the Liverpool suspect's ethnicity. So, to my superstar panel, Connor Tomlinson and Alex Phillips. Connor, so you've got Steve Rotherham, the mayor, saying that it was the right thing because nefarious groups, in his words, had already been trying to stir up speculation on social media. Well, my view then is that if it's okay to immediately say that a suspect is white, which I have no problem with, by the way, surely we have to live in an equal and fair society where police go back to revealing the ethnicity of all suspects, because that just hasn't been happening.
Quite, and it's not nefarious for people to have speculated in an information vacuum when it's an act of basic pattern recognition by now to see a car ploughing into a crowd of people and worry that it's an Islamic terror attack. You know, like the one in Munich in March that was committed by an Afghan national, or the one in the Christmas market in Bavaria late last year that was committed by a Saudi national, or the one in 2015, or 2018 rather, that was committed by a French Algerian, or the one in 2015 that was committed by a Syrian, and there's just a list on and on across Europe, in the UK, to 2017 attacks on Westminster Bridge and 2017 London Bridge attack. It's basic pattern recognition at this point. And so the fact that this seems to have been a bloke that got really drunk at a Hooters, got behind the wheel of a car and have ploughed into the celebrations for the Liverpool football team for as of yet unknown reasons, makes it an anomaly. And so people speculating before they knew does not make it unjustified. And in the complete inverse of this, we know that the police manipulate the media, that they strategically release information to protect the unearned, unimpeachable reputations of imported tribal minority groups, according to the Home Affairs Select Committee, because the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, this is Chief Constable Kennedy, told the Home Office about Axel Ruda-Cabana, so this is in 2024, that she had considered publishing his Christian religious background on the 31st of July, perpetuating that myth that he's a Welsh choir boy. And the reason why, and this is a direct quote from a government document, Her main motivation in publishing the information was to try to protect Muslim communities rather than to prevent disorder. So she did not care about keeping people at home, stopping them going out in the streets for any reason other than she wanted to protect the reputation of Muslims who were targets because on the same day of the vigil, there was a bloke that was carrying a knife and people thought he was a copycat attacker and so gathered outside the mosque. And again, basic pattern recognition made people think this was a terror attack. So in the vacuum of knowledge provided by the police, and when we know they selectively release this information when it can protect minority communities, of course people are going to speculate, and more often than not, they're not wrong.
I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary, Alex Phillips, when you just think about that for 1 second, given they also knew, and by the way, they've never denied they didn't know this immediately. So they knew, okay? They knew from Starmer and Yvette Cooper down that this bloke had an Al-Qaeda manual at his home, in the case of Axel Rudakabana, that he was producing ricin. So unfortunately, that was always going to have an impact, wasn't it, in terms of our trust in authorities going forward?
Yeah, and they've been playing this game for a very long time. It's nothing new. I mean, you open up pages of a newspaper and 3 men who have raped teenage girls on a beach in Bournemouth are from Cardiff and Edinburgh and London, and then you look at the names, you go, yeah, they're not though, are they? They're not actually from Cardiff, Edinburgh and London. I remember when Abdul Abaidi, that guy who was, threw chemicals all over his former partner and had sort of splashed himself on the face, and the police said, manhunt, there's a guy on the loose, he could be anywhere in London, without giving any sort of description, because that might upset people, that might put certain communities under an unfair spotlight. And so this is the game they now play. They've realized that the genie's out of the bottle. They can't put it back in the bottle. They have completely vandalized this country with huge amounts of immigration, balkanized communities. Plenty of men out there. I was just reading earlier on a headline from a former copy of the Daily Mail about a young man of a Muslim background who had raped a teenager and said, oh, well, they said to me in my mosque, actually, that's okay. I didn't realize I was doing something bad. And the judge went, oh, he's a bit naive. He's not very sexually experienced. We won't send him to jail. And so, they've created a situation where we've got clashing cultures, where we have imperiled the safety of women and girls, as I have said repeatedly. Well, as Connor was saying, it is natural for human beings to pattern form. When we see a car plow into a group of people, of course we're going to think, is this yet another Islamist terror attack? You walk through London by the Palace of Westminster and on Westminster Bridge, and all you've got are these huge bollards everywhere. Same in Brussels, bollards everywhere, so cars cannot drive into crowds of people. Why? It's a result of terror attacks. And so because we know that these things are to be somewhat expected now, what the police do is say, okay, the situation's bad enough. What we don't want are acts of reprisals, uprisings, insurrection on top of all of that. So the best thing to do is, if the perpetrator is foreign born or Muslim, not reveal those details and manage the communication of that so people have it drip fed to them and will stay contained. But if it definitely isn't someone of that profile, get that information out right away. That is what they're deciding to do. Some might say, well, look, actually, it's far better if we live in a country where there aren't riots and uprisings and reprisals, and I have some sympathy with that. But this is indicative of the fact that we have got a huge problem in this country, and so we're having to go to such lengths as create a two-tier system in order to manage some of those horrific issues. What I want to know is what we're going to do about those issues, rather than just constantly trying to manage people's objection and resilience to them.
Totally. Because it's almost like, Connor, they care more about information control than why we're in the position in the first place. But first, if you're anything like me, you've spent so much time trying to find the perfect skincare treatments for your face, only to realise that you've been neglecting the skin on your neck. But as I've got older, I've actually started to realise that is a massive oversight, because the neck is always on display, right? Yet so many folk treat it as an afterthought in their routine. I fell into that trap, but so many women in our Outspoken audience will know that skin on your neck is thinner, more delicate, and less oily than facial skin, which means it requires specialised care. Now, that's why I was completely blown away when I received my, and let me show you, I've got it here. It is a beautiful product. My Go Pure Tighten and Lift Neck Cream, which, oh my goodness, smells so good. It's so smooth, and it is transforming the necks of women and some men like me all across the globe. It is such a gorgeous product. I actually saw a noticeable difference within just weeks, and I know it can become a game changer for you too. Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN at checkout. So just head to gopurebeauty.com/Dan, use code DAN, and you're all set. But let me tell you, Go Pure's proprietary firming complex designed to visibly firm and smooth skin on your neck and chest in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. And this is mad, right? They did a consumer study. 100% of users said their skin looked more supple. 97% noticed a firmer appearance. Indeed, Go Pure's full line of science-backed skin and body care have delivered for over 100,000 real women with real results. Dermatologist recommended, cruelty-free, which I know is important to a lot of people. So I guess you could say with over 1 million jars sold, this beauty secret is no longer a secret. So tighten, lift, and restore elasticity in your neck, because your skincare routine shouldn't stop at your jawline. Remember, for a limited time, Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN at checkout. That is DAN. So just head to gopurebeauty.com/Dan, use the code DAN, and you are all set. And after you buy, do us a favor. When they ask where you heard about Go Pure, tell them it was after watching Outspoken. But now, back to the show.
Yeah, and that's easy to explain, Dan, actually. It's because they have this demented theory that you can take a man from Mogadishu and drop him in Manchester, and as long as you don't notice the differences between you and me, he's just as British as you and me. You just let the natural processes of time and all of the taxpayer subsidies he receives and the British values that just sort of percolate in the ether and transmit to him via osmosis, and boom, he's instantly indistinguishable from Winston Churchill. And it's interesting that Alex talks about narrative control, because we know the unit that does this a lot of the time. It's RICU. It's the Research, Information and Communications Unit in the Home Office, who, anytime a terror attack happens and it's a predictably Muslim culprit, the unit decides to run interference and control the front page of newspapers. They dictate what the police say, and they were behind the Manchester Arena bombing post-bombing concert, and they told the British public, don't look back in anger, while they were still grieving for the dead children. So that's what our government does to us. That's what our government does to gaslight us. And then this week, the extra salt in the wound was rubbed in by the Daily Mail. And I want to draw attention to this because they put out this sort of really quite sickening column about Axel Rudikabana's family. And they decided to interview people that were living on his street, and they decided to say that Axel Rudikabana's parents are themselves collateral damage in what their son has done, completely expunging them of any responsibility for raising this killer in our midst when they were given asylum by our country. They were given social housing, it turns out, because they bought the house at a discounted rate on a social housing plot. After they were earning next to nothing, they seem to have got some kind of subsidy from the taxpayer to continue their lifestyle. And of course, their disabled son seemed to have had some assistance from the local community, which is, a great thing if it were repaid in kind with gratitude. And so any time that one of the febrile, tribal, imported minority communities in this country does something violent, the entire British public is gaslit and told, don't be upset about it. But the moment that a drunk white chap gets behind the wheel of a car and causes unconscionable damage, the police are very quick to come out and announce his ethnicity and announce it's nothing to do with terrorism, in order to keep a lid on the sputtering pot of community cohesion that they've got in this country, because they just keep importing terrorists and criminals.
Yeah, I've just found that article, Connor. This is it here. What happened to Axel Rudikabana's family? They fled their home the day after the Southport killings. Now Sarah Rainey reveals the truth about their new lives in hiding. But the reality is, Alex Phillips, we haven't even been told for sure that they're still not under police investigation for their role in it. And it does feel bizarre that the Daily Mail would be attempting to rehabilitate them before actually asking very real questions about, well, we've seen what was in your son's bedroom. We've seen that knife collection. We know about the rice, and we know about the Al-Qaeda manual. That does seem extraordinary.
We also know actually that his father on multiple occasions phoned the police to ask for help with his son, that his father actually went out and said to a taxi driver, do not pick up my child, what his child's intentions were. And look, I come from Gloucester. In Gloucester, we will always live under the shadow of probably some of the most horrific crimes this country has ever seen, perpetrated by Fred and Rose West. I worked at the local supermarket with their daughter. She had nothing to do with it. Her life was blighted, is still blighted by that, by the actions of other members of her family. And it is possible, it is conceivable that you can have a child who is purely wicked, and that is not the fault of the parents, okay? So I think that we do need to make that very clear. I don't understand the motivation for the Daily Mail writing this article, other than perhaps it being sort of clickbait and fascination to anybody who wants to sort of ask more. I would imagine if there were concerns about that family and their intentions and their actions, there would have been arrests made or charges by now, and there haven't been. And I would like to think, okay, whatever someone's background, whatever someone's creed or colour of their skin, just because a family member has done something utterly heinous, the rest of the family aren't necessarily dragged in and put under the spotlight.
Totally. But in our country, because of the contempt of court laws and the weaponization of those laws, what we find increasingly is that the Fourth Estate are not able to properly do their job, and so much information is just effectively buried. And it's just astonishing, Connor, because obviously if you were in a country like the US where these types of contempt of court laws don't exist, we would know the full story of Axel Rudikabana within days.
Yeah, also, if I may, Dan, look, Alex, love you to bits, but are we pretending that the state of the home that we've got the images of, the fact that he somehow had access to an Amazon account and someone's credit or debit card, and someone age verified the knife that he bought, that he had a tablet that he was downloading all sorts of anti-white genocidal and terror materials on, and someone was paying for the internet bill, that he was very vocal about wanting white genocide at school when he was still there, of course, that he wouldn't have brought that up at the dinner table at any point in his 17-year lifespan, and of course the fact that the dad did stop him getting into the cab the week before he went and committed the massacre, but then didn't institutionalize his son or call the police after that, because he didn't. Like, they are responsible. They're not as responsible as their son, but they still raised a murderer in the midst of a country that gave them asylum and untold levels of financial support in order to make their home here. And now the taxpayers are still paying for them to be in hiding, while seemingly no one in the media and only one person in Parliament so far is interested in asking a question about this. Like, why are we still footing their bill? Why are they here at all? They were given asylum 8 years after the Rwandan genocide ended, after being partially related to and working for the ruling government, Paul Kagame's National Rwandan Front. What danger were they in Uganda, while they're still friendly with the Rwandan regime? All of these questions have been left unanswered because it's sort of weirdly morally cloudy to ask what responsibility they bear for this. I think you're just going to get more people concocting more theories the longer that this information vacuum exists.
And do you want to come back, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, look, I still stand by what I said. I don't know the circumstances of that family, the struggles they may have had with their son, whether he was deranged, whether he was difficult, whether they knew how dangerous he was. I don't have children. I don't have teenage children, so I don't know how easy it is to monitor activity on their accounts. We don't know the conversations that were going on behind closed doors. They seem to have raised another son who was highly popular, and all of his classmates at university said he was a fantastic guy. So, I don't want to jump to conclusions that these parents are in any way as disturbed or even partially as disturbed as their son, or culpable, because we don't know what went on inside that household, okay? And so that is where I think in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty, and that actually it is a very sort of civilized way of going about things to look at that through the lens of not just say, well, your son's done something wicked, therefore you are wholly responsible. And I think it is appropriate that we don't necessarily have that information in the public, they are under protection, because quite frankly, if they weren't, there would be reprisals, there would be retribution. You know that, I know that. And so I don't think that would be at all appropriate to have a country allowing that sort of thing to be administered. Like I said, if this was a white family, if this was the parents of, say, John Venables or Robert Thompson, would we want to see them under attack as well? I mean, I think we've got to be relatively circumspect about this, because I don't know the nature of the relationships in that household. What I do know is on a number of occasions, at least the father did try and ask for help. My big question is, why didn't anybody come to help? If the father had said, my son has issues, my son is dangerous, why did the state fail to do something about that? We know this guy, there have been reports of this boy in school and his behaviors there. And it seems to me, actually, the people who should be hanging their heads in shame, the people who need to be being investigated right now, are all of the very people who are paid by the taxpayer to safeguard the community, who absolutely failed in their duty.
Yeah. Well, that I think we can all agree with. And unfortunately, there are so many of those failures now, and still no adequate replacement to the Prevent scheme.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.